What's up, y'all? It's Carla, aka Seela the Poet. I know it's been a minute since I did a live stream. It hasn't been easy. Um, right now in my life, there's a lot of transitions happening. Um, it's been busy for me, trying to get my son ready, to go to college. My daughter, by God's grace, she got a job. And so my children, they're growing up, and just me trying to be there to be able to kind of guide their way and support them in any way I can. So today, I wanted to talk about elder abuse. I don't know if anybody knows what elder abuse is or has heard of it, but for those who don't know, I'm going to read the definition. Okay, and I got this off of Google. Elder abuse is an intentional act or failure to act that causes or creates a risk of harm to an older adult, 60 years old or older. Okay? It can include neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, abandonment, emotional and psychological abuse, financial abuse, and self neglect. Okay? Um, so, some signs of elder abuse would be malnutrition, dehydration, um, poor hygiene, fearfulness, anxiety, withdrawnness around certain caregivers, or in general, untreated medical problems, especially if they have a caregiver, um, unexplained bruises, black eyes, broken bones, as well as unexplained cuts and bruises to the anus, vagina, genitalia. You get the idea. So um, I'm inspired to do this live because just a vulnerable moment. Um, I'm a part of a family that is abusive and dysfunctional. Um, a couple of years ago, I went no contact with the ringleader. That is my mother. She was the ringleader of a lot of the abuse that went on. When I was a child, my dad was the main abuser. He was on drugs, he was an alcoholic, and he used to beat up my mother in front of me. I also caught abuse when I would go on court ordered visits. For those of you who might be watching my channel for the first time, it's just a quick summary and a recap. Then I started going through abuse with my mother. When I ended up being under her custody, and after a couple of years, she became increasingly controlling, increasingly threatening, increasingly violent, especially when she wouldn't get her way. And as a result, I went through a lot. I had to see a psychologist. I had to go to group therapy. I even spent a stint in a um, domestic violence, home, a domestic violence shelter. And I also ended up choosing a spouse who also ended up being abusive. So I know a lot about abusive behavior. I know a lot about behaviors that are done by abusive family members, abusive relatives, abusive partners. So I decided to do this live in in memoriam of my grandmother, Carmina White Scott. She passed away in 2016, and I truly believe that it was a series of abusive actions that actually might have been the catalyst to her passing away. Um, so I read to you the definition of what elder abuse is. Around 20, I would say somewhere between 2014 and 20, maybe 2015, um, I was going through, you know, some issues, and basically, you know, it was a really, really hard time, a really, really dark time in my life. And I started visiting my grandmother. And what I noticed when I was visiting her, she seemed to every once in a while, um, she seemed kind of like disheveled, meaning that like the clothing that she was wearing, my grandmother was a pretty sharp dresser. She loved to wear wigs. She loved to, she had some really, really nice outfits and really, really nice clothing. And I noticed that she wasn't dressing the way that she used to dress. So I would visit her, and we would, she would tell me stories about her life in Jamaica. She would tell me, some historical stories about different relatives, and we really began to bond and get really, really close. She actually showed me her will. She had two wills made out, and she was talking to me about, what she wanted. God forbid something would happen to her. And I guess, when people are older, they you know, begin to get concerned about the future. And I guess, she was on kind of on that vibe. So we were bonding. She was telling me stories, but I noticed that she didn't really completely seem herself. And, she was staying, at her home, but she was always locking her door. And, I know she used to do it for safety, but this time, she was locking her door, her bedroom door. She had a lock on it. She also had her own little refrigerator in her room. So, I asked my grandmother, I said, well, why do you have a refrigerator there? And she said how my mother and the people that she was living with, my mother and my sisters, how they would complain when she would go into the kitchen to cook her food, or if she, I guess, borrowed some of their food, they would complain about it. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, why would they be complaining over food and stuff like that? So, I figured, well, I know that some people are very, very protective over their stuff, but it didn't make sense to me because after all, that's her house. And, it's her mortgage and stuff like that. So the people you're living with, they don't want you to have access to the kitchen to cook your own food. So now you have your own refrigerator in your room. So that kind of didn't make sense to me. So she also showed me on her leg where she had an open wound, an open cut. I don't know how she got it, but it was open and it looked like it was infected. And I said, has anybody taken you to the doctor? She said, no. I said, what? So I made sure, that I went and I took her to the doctor. And, they were able to give her something to put on it, antibiotics, or, give her ointment or cream or whatever. But in my mind, I'm like, well, why isn't, she's living with my mother and my sisters at the time, my sister at the time, why aren't they taking her to the doctor? Why is it that she's, telling me all this stuff and she's not talking to them, to go and take her to the doctor and stuff like that? So I continued to visit her, and I noticed that, every once in a while her memory, would kind of fade in, fade out. And But it wasn't to the point where I thought that she had dementia. I didn't think that she had that because she still had control of all her faculties, right? She was still able to give herself showers. She was still able to go out places and stuff. But she just became increasingly isolated in that room. So she started kind of confiding in me that, she's living in the house, but she feels like, she's safe in her own room. So I continue to press her. I continue to ask her questions. And she starts talking about how, I think my mother, she put a camera into the house. And she didn't really like the fact that the camera was there. But she dealt with it, but she didn't like it. My grandmother at the time also had her own laundromat. And so she started telling me about how, my mom, I think, was writing checks or something like that, I guess, for the rent, and how, I guess, people were going in and out of her bank account and all this stuff. And, so I'm putting two and two together. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, that doesn't sound right, because that's your business, that's your laundromat, and that's your bank and savings account. Why are people writing checks on your behalf that you didn't give them permission to write or whatever? So, I decided to talk to my own counselor about the things that my grandmother was telling me. And, they said that it was possible elder abuse or financial abuse, and then they began to describe, some of the things I was telling them were kind of like indicators. So I think they gave me the number to something called, oh, hi, how are you? What's going on? Eli. Yeah, it's nice to see you. Thank you for watching. So they gave me a number to something called, I think, APS, Adult Protective Services. I gave the number to my grandmother, and they suggested that, if my grandmother felt like she needed to, she should give them a call or whatever. Or they suggested that I could give them a call. So, at first I didn't really do that, but then later on I did. And then, I guess they assigned a worker to her who would visit the house. But what happened was that my grandmother didn't really trust the worker. I guess, she might have not given her good vibes. And, sometimes just a person's personality and yours just doesn't click or just doesn't, come together, and I guess she didn't really like the worker. So I think they closed the case, and she wasn't able to really, they weren't able to do much. Eventually, things came to a head, and my mother got my sisters to lie and say that I attacked my sister. When I was on one of my visits to my grandmother, they claimed that I attacked her, and then they filed a police report. I ended up filing a police report, and we ended up going to court. I asked for an order of protection. They asked for an order of protection, and they brought my other younger sister into it. And long story short, the judge believed my mother and my two sisters because there were more of them, and there was only two of us, me and my grandmother together. So for a while, there was an order of protection in effect against me. I couldn't go visit my grandmother. I couldn't help her. I couldn't do anything. But I appealed it. I decided to go and get an appeal. During the appeal process, it was long. I ended up having to go to appellate court, and I represented myself. It was hard for me to get a lawyer. But as a result of that, they ended up canceling it, the order of protection, and sending the case back to family court. In the interim of this happening, I went to try to take my grandmother to, I think, housing court, because with the tension in the house and the stress that was going on, she confided in me that she wanted my mother and sisters out of the house. And so she, I think, put into either, I'm not going to say evict them, but she kind of wrote paperwork to give them a notice to quit, which is like kind of a way of saying, you need to be given time to go and to maybe move somewhere else. And so I tried to take my grandmother to a court case. My mother wasn't having it, and claimed that, I think my grandmother claimed that my mother said she had, I think, a dental appointment or some type of doctor's appointment. So I go to pick up my grandmother, and my mother will not let my grandmother out of the house. She literally is grabbing her arms, okay, grabbing her by her arms, and literally pushed her into the wall. And I actually saw it, and a next door neighbor that was across the street actually saw what happened as well. So I ended up calling the cops. So I called the police. The police end up coming there. My mother keeps slamming the door. My grandmother keeps trying to leave the house. She refuses to let her go out of the house and is grabbing her, pushing her against the wall, all of that. And so the police come and they escort my grandmother out of the house, okay? As a result of that, we ended up having to go back to court again. This time, they granted my grandmother an order of protection. And they granted me permission to be able to be the helper for my grandmother. So finally, when everything was said and done, we filed a police report. My grandmother was scared. She was upset after everything that she endured with my mother and how my mother treated her. So we ended up getting the police report. And as a result of that, my mother was arrested. And the criminal court gave my grandmother a criminal order of protection. And she also the court also gave me, I guess because I was a witness, an order of protection as well. So it was just kind of like a messed up situation. But because of all the stress, because of all the tension, because of all the worrying, while we were waiting for that to go through, my grandmother ended up having a stroke or mini stroke. And that caused her to go into the hospital. It ended up that she ended up having to go into a rehab facility afterwards. I would go and I would visit her there, but by that time, I guess because of the stroke or whatever, her memory was really, really going. And as a result of all of that, she ended up passing away. I think I would say about 10 or 15 days later after my mother did what she did to her. And I share that story just to let you know, that what my grandmother, Carmina, the late Carmina White Scott endured, that was what elder abuse is. It's when you are physically violent, when you are financially abusive, or when you mistreat someone who's an elder, someone who's in a vulnerable position. It could be a person with dementia, or it could be a person with all their faculties, and you are mistreating them. It's either you're taking their money, you're stealing their money, taking away their checkbook, taking away their cash, and you're neglecting to help them go to the doctor if they need medical treatment, help them go to the hospital. That is what elder abuse is about. So a couple of days ago, I ended up getting a phone call from a relative, and it caught me off guard, and it kind of pissed me off too. So I get a phone call, asking me whether stating that the bank called this relative and stated that he was taken off, I think, of a relative's bank account as a beneficiary. And I replied, I don't know anything, about that. And I like, yeah, I took my grandfather to the bank, but it's not like, I went and I signed any papers or anything like that. And so I just felt like it was accusatory, and it wasn't cool. And so in families, sometimes when you have an older individual and they're getting to the end of their days, you're going to have family members that start, kind of paying attention to them, being a part of their life, but they're doing it with ill intentions. They're trying to do it in order to get access to money or to get access to their assets or to get access to their will and stuff like that. And so, when I go and I get to know my grandparents and I hang out with them and I talk to them and I spend time with them, it's out of love. I love them. I don't care about will and I don't care about the money, because I have an understanding that if an older person has money and they have resources and they have assets, that belongs to them. Nobody should be able to control that money. If they have, their faculties and their mind is still good and they're still strong and they're still healthy, they have the right to their own money. They have the right to say what they want to happen to their own resources. They have a right to say, how that money should be spent, who they want to give it to. If they want to give it to a certain family member, cool. If they want to give it to charity, cool. But sometimes when you have toxic ass family members, or you have people that they have agendas and all they care about, by being a part of that person's life is getting access to, the older individual who's in a vulnerable position stuff, it's like you begin to question what type of people are these? What type of family is that? Like, what is wrong with these people? It's really sickening, and the thing is that me, I will always take a stand against what I know is wrong behavior. Okay, if you're taking advantage of somebody who's an older individual, and if there's something, that could be done to help that individual, I would try to do it. I mean, why are families so fucked up these days? Why are people so damn money hungry? Why are people so just, I don't even have words. Like, people are just so evil and people are just so selfish and narcissistic. And it's just older people are the historians of society. Older people, yes, it's the truth. Older people, they are the historians of society. And without the older people, we wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't have even gotten to where we are. They are our ancestors. We are their descendants. We should give that respect. Now, if they're not an abusive individual that's harming you, and they're a loving individual, and maybe they made some mistakes in their life, but they're a loving person, then you should be able to be a part of that person's life and do right by that person. But when people get older, some people use that as, to become opportunists to that person. They want to go and they want to get access to this and access to that. And it shouldn't be like that. If you love your family, you care about your family, then that's all that matters, Yeah, so I'm just, in my mind, I think about my grandmother, Carmina, the late Carmina White Scott, and I miss her. And the fact that my relative is going through something now that's similar, with the financial issues and Stuff like this, it's really a damn shame. And man, I have no words. All I could do is vent. You know, older people, if you have older individuals in your family, try to show common decency to them. Try to show a level of respect. If they're not abusive and they're not psychotic and you are able to have a relationship with them, show a level of respect, man. Show a level of respect. If they have money, they have assets, they have property, or they have things that belong to them, don't try to steal it. Don't try to take it from them, you know, because it's theirs, you know. And I believe in Yahweh God. I believe that there's a God in heaven. And when you do stuff like this to people, you know, it's going to come back to you. It's going to eventually come back to you. You know what they say, karma is a bee. But I believe in universal law. Whenever you do something, there's always going to be a reaction to what you do, you know. But people need to respect elders. They really do, you know. And elders are people that, you know, they deserve some type of help, especially if they're in a vulnerable position. So I just had to, you know, speak out on behalf of my grandmother. This is the first time I think I went more in depth about the story. I may have spoken about it on another live, but I just wanted to, you know, in her memory, I felt like I had to speak out about this. I have to, because there's a lot of people that don't know what it is and they may be doing it. And if they find out what this is, maybe they can, you know, modify their behavior and not do these things, you know. And just, we got to care for the older individuals. We got to care for them, because none of us would be here without them, you know, for good or for bad, you know. My grandmother wasn't a perfect person, but she was a loving person. And I learned a lot from her. I think I get my work ethic from her, and so do my children, you know. But I miss her desperately. I feel like that was a major failure in my life, you know, that I wasn't able to save her. You know, people were doing these evil things to her. You know, they were mistreating her. And at the end of the day, I tried to help her. And at the end of the day, I couldn't save her. And I feel like she would have still been here had people had not been mistreating her, trying to take her money before she died, and, you know, just not treating her properly. You know, we have to do better as a people. We have to do better and respect, you know, have a level of respect for your elders. As long as they're not abusive or criminals and they're not doing anything bad to you, try to have at least a level of decency and respect. Because if you were in their position, you would want that same thing too. So I just wanted to speak out about that. And, you know, you can share in the comments if you want to comment on the situation. Please, if you want to share your stories, you can do that as well. But I had to speak out about it. And I thank you for listening, for those who were on the live. You know, it took me a lot of courage to be able to speak out about this. I don't talk about this too much because, like I said, I feel like it's a major trauma of mine, you know, that I lost my grandmother because of this type of shit that was happening in the family. You know, and I feel like I couldn't help her the way that I needed to. So all I could say for now, there's going to be more content lately that's going to be coming. I will be trying to speak more often about, you know, certain issues to try to bring awareness. I think we all need to speak about things. And that's all I have to say for now. So I hope everybody has a good night. Please keep the faith, and God bless.